All right. Uh, Welcome, everybody. This is the Becoming an Institution Level Cyberinfrastructure Leader Workshop. It is Wednesday, August 6th, 2025. This is the very first standalone workshop of this kind, although it's not the first time that we have presented cyberinfrastructure leadership content. And I'm gonna sort of walk through a lot of this, and we'll get a feel for the workshop and what's to come over the course of the next couple of days, and hopefully useful things will be revealed. So let's dive right in. Here is the URL for the workshop, so feel free to join us there if you need the materials. By the way, there aren't going to be that much in the way of downloadable materials because other than this one and a mini talk in the next session, pretty much or almost everything is going to be panels. If you are having any difficulty with the workshop or if you need information, we have a beautiful a Gmail address set up, which auto forwards to my email. So don't be shy about sending me a love letter or hate mail. Um, we're using Zoom, and I ask that everybody please mute. So don't have your camera on, your video, don't have your audio on, except when you are asking questions or making comments. And you are welcome at any time during this presentation to ask questions, to make comments, both in chat and by voice. I love having a conversation, a discussion, rather than me droning on and on. But if you make me drone on and on, by golly, I'll do it. But when you're not talking, mute, and please keep your camera off for the benefit of people who have limited bandwidth. I'm in the back bedroom and I'm pretty far from our Wi-Fi, so I don't like to overconsume the bandwidth either. Okay, we're on audio and video. Should work on any system. This is standard issue Zoom stuff. If you can't use the Zoom app, either on a PC or on a handheld, you are welcome to phone in. Please do me a kindness if you're going to phone in and send me an email with your name and institution and phone number so I can map the phone number to an individual. That improves our reporting back to the NSF. And I've been saying that for years, and I'm totally not kidding. And when I say I'm not kidding, I just a week ago got funded a seven-figure grant from the NSF, partially, admittedly a small part, but partially through reporting how many unique individuals have participated in these kinds of activities. And so I need to have an accurate list of who has participated in order to have an accurate head count and an accurate institution count. Thank you, those of you who are putting nice comments in the chat. So please do take it seriously if you're going to be on the phone. If you're going to be on the Zoom app, please make sure that your name is um, uh, something I can figure out who you are. That is, if it's first name and institution, I can probably work it out from that, or if it's first name, last name. If you have a very common name, please put both your full name and your institution. Otherwise, there's no hope of me figuring out who you are. If you are John Smith, please, please, please include your institution in your Zoom name. Okay. If you're outside the US, you are also welcome to participate, and I think we do have some non-US registrants for this, so we'd love to have you in the mix. And there are not toll-free phone numbers, but there are toll numbers if you have to use the phone. Normally, presumably, you'd be using the app. Again, when you're on, mute your mic except when you're talking, and keep your camera off. Okay? This is an experiment. This is our little outline here. This is an experiment. We'll talk about the virtual residency. We'll talk about this workshop. And then we'll talk a little bit about leadership in general. And by the way, this workshop is not a general leadership workshop, although that will inform the content of the workshop. It is specifically and explicitly a cyber infrastructure leadership, a research computing leadership workshop. But inevitably, we will end up talking about general leadership topics as well. But there are many organizations that provide excellent leadership training in the general sense. Um, Okay, so reminder, this is an experiment. Some of this stuff is exciting and new. Anytime we do a panel, it's exciting and new by definition. This is part of and also a little bit separate from the virtual residency, those of you who've had exposure to that, and we'll talk about the virtual residency in a little bit. And what I mean by that is we had a realization as we were planning this content. We've been in the virtual residency workshops proper, we've been mostly doing introductory and intermediate content, and I'll talk about what that means in a little bit. Um, but we wanted to have a separate standalone workshop for the CI leadership area. And the reason we wanted to do that is because that doesn't just apply to research computing facilitators, which is what the virtual residency is designed for. It also applies to all cyber infrastructure professions, research computing professions. And so it is really important that um, we provide a venue that is targeted at the full spectrum of cyber infrastructure professionals, not just or not primarily facilitators. And so we really want you to be part of that, regardless of which of the five facings is your role at your institution. So this is pioneering a new way to train the next generation cyber infrastructure workforce, and indeed the current generation. Okay, and only you can make this a success. I don't know why I misspelled workshop. Only you can make this a success. Ask questions, interrupt, have discussions, volunteer what you've learned, what ideas you have. And look, you may volunteer an idea and others may disagree with it, and that's fine. That's part of how we learn from each other. You're always welcome to put comments in the Zoom chat. You're always welcome to unmute yourself and talk, offer your thoughts. Don't monopolize, of course, but you're always welcome to participate. But you all have to be in charge. This is not us telling you what things should be. This is you telling us what you need. Okay, so let's talk about the virtual residency because this workshop springs from the virtual residency. So the virtual residency, as many of you have already experienced, the virtual residency focuses on teaching pre-service and in-service CI facilitators how to do CI facilitation or how to do it better if they're already doing it. But the hidden secret agenda is recruiting and training the next generation of CI, of research computing leaders, because those leaders, to a significant extent, are going to grow out of the community of CI professionals. Okay. So, how does the virtual residency work? And again, this workshop is closely tied into it. We do an annual week-long summer workshop. We've been doing that since 2015. From 2015 to 2019, it was hybrid, both on-site and remote over video conferencing. Starting in 2020, because of COVID, we switched to just video conferencing, and we have stayed in that mode for a couple of reasons. One, if it's 100% on video conferencing, then there's no dollar cost associated with that, and we don't have to constantly scramble for funds, which can be very challenging. Number two, it hugely reduces the labor cost of both arranging and conducting the workshop. The labor cost of an on-site workshop is, I would say, probably a factor of five bigger than the labor cost for an Zoom workshop. And back through 2019, I had someone I was working with who did the bulk of the work for that. Since that time, I haven't had Debbie anymore, and so I don't have the wherewithal to do that all by myself. I can't carve out the time to do it. So that's why we switched to pure Zoom. It turns out it also helps people who are unable to attend in person, which in practice is the majority of folks, for space considerations, if nothing else. We do also hold an annual meeting at the SC Supercomputing Conference. We do weekly calls, so some of them are for planning the workshops. Typically, the way this works is when we are far away from a workshop, one call a month is to plan the workshop. As we get closer, it becomes every other week. And typically, in the last month or two, it becomes every week is a planning call for the workshop. And that's certainly been true here, although we ended up only needing a couple of those calls for this workshop beyond what we did in the lead up to the June virtual residency workshop. We've also done some apprenticeships. We've done a grant proposal writing apprenticeship. We've done a paper writing apprenticeship. And now we're doing grant running apprenticeship, which is the other weekly calls in between the workshop planning calls. And there we're doing the certified cyberinfrastructure facilitator training and development certification program. And in particular, creating the exams and scoring rubrics for the badges. Before the virtual residency, no one was dumb enough to try and do this. But by golly, we are. And that's worked, I think, very much to people's benefit. Um, Being stupid enough to take that leap of faith and hope that we could do it. So who has been involved? Well, we've served almost 2,000 people so far. It is possible, though by no means guaranteed, that by the time we finish this workshop this week, that we will cross the 2,000 mark. But that is not guaranteed. So we might not. It really depends on how many people attend this workshop who have not previously participated in the virtual residency. But that's from almost 550 institutions in every U.S. state and 4 U.S. territories. So Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, Guam, and U.S. Virgin Islands, plus 19 other countries on 6 continents with a hope to hit number 20. By the way, 6 continents, I despair of Antarctica. I don't think we will ever have participation from Antarctica. I know there is a very small group of people who winter over in Antarctica, which I believe would be our summer. And they could, in principle, participate, but I have the gravest of doubts that that would ever happen. And those numbers are for all virtual residency activities, not just for the workshops. Now, let's talk about the levels that we present these workshops at. Um, so when we were developing the virtual residency program, we started without really thinking of what level of content are we presenting? And we just sort of threw the content together, things that we thought would be valuable and interesting for people to learn about. And we didn't really think carefully about the levels. But since then, as we've done more workshops, we've created more content, we've had more session topics, we've begun to think in a more systematic way about the virtual residency and about workforce development and training for cyber infrastructure professionals more broadly. And so what we've come to now is sort of a breakdown and a breakout of 5 levels of training that we have been providing. So level 1, and this is focused exclusively on cyber infrastructure facilitators, level 1 and 2, that's true. Level 1 is foundational skills. We call this introductory virtual residency, foundational skills for pre-service and early in-service CI facilitators. Now, to be clear, this includes a lot of participants who are not pre-service and early in-service. We have found that a lot of people come back year after year, even though they are more experienced as CI facilitators. They still like having that refresher of that content. But then the intermediate level is, call it intermediate skills for more experienced CI facilitators. So not early career, but you know, let's say second, third year and beyond. So maybe not necessarily mid-career, but not novice facilitators. So those are the two levels of the virtual residency proper. Level three is this workshop. We've never done this before. It used to be that this content was incorporated into the virtual residency and we called it Virtual Residency Advanced. But the reason that we decided to bring this out into its own workshop, as I mentioned before, is so that we could open that event up to all CI professionals and not just facilitators. Certainly, facilitators are very welcome, and I suspect will be the majority of our participants, but it is by no means limited to facilitators, and we encourage all CI professionals to take advantage of this opportunity. And then finally, levels 4 and 5 are under what we call the Cyberinfrastructure Leadership Academy. Originally, the CI Leadership Academy was designed for what we're calling now level 5, which is transitioning people from being institution level CI leaders to becoming national CI leaders. And the reason that that's so important is because a lot of the national CI leaders are retiring or have retired by now. There's a very large cohort of those leaders who are at or beyond retirement age. Um, and um, while we're happy for the next phase of their lives on a personal level, it has the potential to represent a huge loss to our community. Our ability to help direct and steer the national research computing agenda is in jeopardy if the people who have the greatest understanding of how to do that suddenly disappear because they retire or pass away. Um, and so we wanted to have an opportunity for those folks, for want of a better word, the gray heads, to be able to train up the whippersnappers, the institutional CI leaders, so that the whippersnappers could transition into national CI leadership. And I think that has been pretty successful. Um, but as part of that, we did a half day workshop at, I think it was PERC 23, the Practice and Experience in Advanced Research Computing conference in 2023. We did a half day workshop, and what the institutional CI leaders said, their feedback was very adamant. Yes, we do want to learn how to transition to national CI leadership, but we also want to learn how to be better institution level CI leaders. Yeah. And um, so I'll be honest, that was not on my radar screen to create a program to address that need. The CI Leadership Academy was intended exclusively, when it was originally formulated, was intended exclusively for the transition from institution level CI leadership to national CI leadership because of the brain drain that we are experiencing in an ongoing way and is not going to go away. That's unlikely to slow down. Um, so um, it became very clear that there was demand for that. So this year, I think it was in March, for the very first time at the spring meeting of the Coalition for Academic Scientific Computation, or CASC, which, among other things, in my mind, is the de facto professional society for CI leaders. Um, so at that workshop, or the day before that CASC spring meeting, we held a 1 day CI Leadership Academy workshop on becoming a better institution level CI leader. So we've presented all 5 levels at least once as of this workshop. What the acronym stands for: Coalition for Academic Scientific Computation, or CASC. Um, so um, the um, we are now in the process of getting all of that stuff out to the community, And we want to make this an ongoing thing. Now, I don't know whether we're going to hold this workshop every single year. We might do it every other year. We might do it every year. I don't think there's a decision on that. Um, Kind of depends on the labor cost. If it's low labor, why not? If it's high labor, then we might pull back a bit. But now we're getting to the point where all of this stuff is available to the community, and we're going to have, I think, in the long term, a much better ability to take people through from the very beginning of their career as at least a certain subset of CI professionals to national CI leadership for those who are interested in pursuing it. And we really do need people to do that. Okay, so let's talk about this workshop. Um, so who's here? Well, we don't know, right? The little counter on Zoom says there are 147 of us logged into this session, which is pretty good. Um, Between the June virtual residency workshop and this week's workshop, we are at, and actually that number is probably already a little bit under because a few more have come in, but 650 plus pre-registrants for the two workshops combined. So for June, it was 380, from which we had 328 attendees, which might be the highest percentage ratio of attendees to pre-registrants we've ever had. I don't know. Um, for this workshop, well over 500 pre-registrants. That includes a whole lot of people who pre-registered for both workshops right out of the gate. We did have some people who pre-registered for just the June workshop and then re-registered so that they would be on the mailing list for today's workshop, for this week's workshop. But a pretty good group here. And most of the people who pre-registered either registered for both workshops or registered only for this workshop. Okay, and then 273 pre-registered institutions between the two workshops this year from almost every U.S. state, and I think three territories plus 10 other countries on five continents. That includes 245. Again, that's probably a little under for this week's workshop, and almost 200 for the previous workshop institutions, of which 164 attended. Now, we will not have 656 attendees, sorry, 523 attendees at this workshop. We will have some fraction of that. That fraction could be anywhere from a third to 90%. It's probably 50% in practice, but as you can see, we're at almost 150 just in this introductory session. So we'll see how it goes. All right, so what's the content? So we have, other than this little small talk to set the table for the workshop, we're going to start with money because everybody loves knowing about how to get money. I know we're all standing around with our dipper, wanting to know where the money river flows so we can dip our dipper in the money river and drink deeply from the water of money. So we'll start with a mini talk and then immediately transition into a panel about the CI funding landscape. Then, and notice lots of panels. Strategic thinking and visioning, so thinking like a leader, essentially. Recruiting and retaining researchers, computing and data intensive researchers. Then tomorrow, our sessions, again, all panels, deciding which technologies to adopt and when, leading teams of CI professionals, and low-cost solutions for hardware. Notice we start and end on money. Each day we're talking about people, and then in between there we have other topics, one technical, one more leadership focused. You can get the agenda right off the webpage. We have 44 speakers, panel moderators, and panelists from 40 institutions. I'm not going to read you the list out loud in my remaining 4 minutes, but I wanted to just point out because one of the complaints we've had historically is we were having the same people appearing in multiple sessions in the same workshop, and people didn't like that. They wanted, in any given workshop, they wanted to hear from as many different people as they possibly could. So I want to thank in advance all of our presenters and all of our presenting institutions for your contributions. This is really, really valuable. How did we pick them? We begged and we pleaded and we wheedled and needled. So the way that this works is that we put out a poll to find out what topics does the community think are the most important. So anyone can participate in that poll. And once we've got a good sense of what people want, usually we wait till we have about 100 or so responses before making a decision. Once we've got a reasonable idea of what the topics should be, then we start begging people. We set up the schedule so that people know when they're going to be available. One year I tried to do it where we got people to agree to topics without knowing the schedule and then tell us their schedule, their availability. And then I had to spend, I think it was several days just trying to match make to get everything to line up. And I decided I'm never ever going to do that again. So now we set the schedule before we recruit the presenters. And that worked really well. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do for this workshop that is different from the virtual residency, with the virtual residency, we recruit the presenters from among the virtual residents. With this workshop, because it's about leadership, we wanted the perspectives of experienced CI leaders. And so we recruited our panelists and moderators and presenters from the CI Leadership Academy members instead of from the virtual residents. So you'll see that as sort of a qualitative difference in terms of the source of the information that you're getting. So what's our goal here? What are we trying to accomplish? Learning to become institution level CI leaders. And that includes both learning how to do it ourselves and understanding how our bosses think. Because when you understand how your boss thinks, you'll do a much better job of A, providing the capabilities that your boss needs, and B, explaining to your boss why your ideas are good. So if you've got an idea of something that you think should happen, you're going to do a much better job explaining that to your boss if you understand what issues your boss is dealing with. And then ultimately, you should be thinking about, yes, now I'm transitioning into institution level CI leadership, but eventually I should be thinking about national CI leadership. And the reason for that is over time, we become the only people who know how things work. And so inevitably, we will all be dragged kicking and screaming upstairs. And so you have to start from, if I'm going to be dragged kicking and screaming upstairs, at least I should know when I get there how to do it. Okay, I want to say a few words about leadership and then I'll wrap up. So one thing is a mindset issue. And I'm going to couch it as the difference between labor and management, although there's a number of ways you can slice and dice this. But what I'm going to call the labor mindset is someone tells me what to do and I do it. And I make sure that I'm doing the things that I'm told. And I don't spend a lot of time focused on the things that I'm not told to do. Now, I may be given sort of a vague general topic area, not specific instructions for every task. That's fine. But I'm not thinking beyond my duty roster, right? The mindset management is I tell my organization what ought to be happening, right? So I've been meeting with institutional leaders across my institution, the administrative leaders, the institutional officers of my institution about research computing and about something that we are proposing for the institution. Excuse me. And in order to make a compelling case, I need to know what each of them individually is concerned about and what aspects they are going to find compelling. But I also need to have a clear idea in my head, what is it that my institution needs? Because to go spend time with them and not have a clear vision of where we should be going next, that's not going to help them. They're not going to have that vision. They're not in the trade. They rely on me to have these kinds of ideas, right? And it's not just necessarily my own ideas. This is from our entire team. It may be from our community of researchers, but these ideas need to go up that chain of command, and I need to be able to explain them to my higher ups. Okay. So here's a thought experiment. And it's okay if you don't have a good answer to this. And it's okay if you have, call it a small potatoes answer to this. But the goal is to get you to the point where you have a solid and compelling answer to this. So think of a time in your career when you noticed either something your organization didn't do but ought to do, or did do but ought to do better. And then you formulated a solution to that situation. You sold it both up and down the chain of command. So not only did you get your bosses on board with it, and your bosses' bosses, and your bosses' bosses' bosses, but you also got your team on board with it. You saw to it that it was implemented. You don't have to have implemented it yourself, but you made sure that it was implemented. And now it's part of your organization's regular practice. To be taken seriously as a leader, whether it's a cyber infrastructure leader or otherwise, to be taken seriously as a leader, you've got to have stories of this kind, right? It to be a leader doesn't mean they appointed you to manage a team. That may be an important component of it, but that's not what that means. That's not what leader means. Leader means you have a clear vision of where your organization ought to go with respect to your area of responsibility, and you can communicate that vision in a compelling way, and you can bring people on board and then make it become true, make it become real, take it from idea to implementation, and make it become normal. All right, what is leadership? My favorite is the Harry Truman quote. A leader is a person who has the ability to get others to do what they don't want to do and like it. Okay, here's another one. I got these off a webpage here. Leadership is the capacity and will to rally men and women to a common purpose and the character that inspires confidence. Leadership is the process of persuasion or example by which an individual or a team induces a group to pursue objectives held by the leader or shared by the leader and the followers. And leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. These are really, really important. I want to add one more thing that I picked up from a fantasy book years and years ago that I think is really good. The king's house is all the world. Meaning, here, house meaning household. Meaning, if you're the leader, you can't just focus on the things you care about. You can't just focus on the things your team cares about. You have to focus on what all of your constituents need. You have to focus on everyone. You can't leave some people out. Yes, sometimes you have to prioritize some over others. That is absolutely true. But you have to take responsibility in the context of your purview. You have to take responsibility for what everyone needs. You can't deliver everything to everyone. You never will be able to. But you have to take responsibility. You have to take responsibility and ownership for everyone. Okay, are there any questions? We have a short break and then we'll do our first major session. Okay.
Can you
I
repost that first slide with the URL for the slide decks that
Sure.
are being presented
Yeah,
while we
yeah.
break?
But
Thank you.
there will be minimal slides. Off the top of my head, I'm only aware of one group that's doing slides. There may be others, and I'm not aware of it. And the one group that's doing slides, I think, are not doing a lot of slides. I may be mistaken, but I think it's not a big slide deck. And where possible, I will post the slides in advance, but in some cases, it will end up not being possible. And by the way, on the web page there's link to a Google Doc folder, which I think now everybody can access. Has all the permissions set properly, I think. Um, for each of these sessions, there is a Google Doc, and you can put notes in that session. Everybody is welcome. Thank you, Kurt. Everybody is welcome to put notes in those Google Docs as we do these sessions. All right. Thank you, everyone. We're on pause for the next 8.5 minutes. And then at quarter till the hour, yeah, that's correct. At quarter till the hour, we will start the next session. And real quick, um, let me report what the session is. Again, it's the CI funding landscape, and that starts in about 7.5 minutes. So we'll see you then.